All right, folks, it being 6 o'clock and a quorum being present, I'll call to order this the May 14th, Charter Review Committee meeting. Start with pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I guess a lucky. We do have the May 7th, meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes, additions, deletions, modifications of any kind to the minutes from May 7th? Hearing and seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Ms. Botrain motions that we approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Very good. Mr. Lawler seconds. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. I'll note that with Ms. Cavaco being absent tonight, Mr. Bulletin will be serving as a full member. Mr. Bulletin, your vote?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote?
Abstain.
Thank you. Ms. Cavaco, as I said, is not present. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mr. Piver?
Abstain.
Ms. Botrain?
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli? Oh, I think you're muted, Rob. I still can't hear you. You're muted.
I think I need to abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I vote yes. The motion carries with 6 in favor and, sorry, 7 in favor and 3 abstentions. Including our alternate who also abstained. All right, that being done, we'll move on to the public comment section. I will note that there are a number of folks in the room from the various committees that are going to be discussed here tonight. We didn't have anyone come on as a special guest speaker because you've all been before the committee. But I'd like to invite anyone up if you have additional comments that you'd like to share with the committee here tonight. So, Louis? Anyone?
No, just to reiterate what we requested at our last meeting, is a clarification to the language currently described what the open space committee's mission is.
Very good. All right. So why don't we come back up and talk a little bit about it? Because it's going to be our first item.
Okay, great.
If you could introduce yourself, write your name and precinct down, and then just talk a little bit about what you asked for in the last round.
Yeah.
What's the thing?
My name is Deb Iaquinto. I'm with the Open Space Committee, and when we last visited you, we requested a clarification to the language that's currently in the charter describing the mission of the Open Space Committee. Currently, the language simply reads: an Open Space Committee comprised of 9 persons to act in an advisory capacity to the town meeting and the planning board with respect to the preservation of natural open space, period. We are requesting a clarification or an enhancement to that language to add in another half sentence in order to protect the environment and to ensure appropriate access to public lands. We think that just clarifies what we're doing and answers the why that we sometimes get asked when we're making requests and decisions.
Ensure access to
Ensure appropriate access to public lands.
public plans. Okay. Thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
All right. Is there any public comment online?
Mr. Chairman, no, not for me.
Thank you, Al. Lorenzo, do you have anything?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Folks, it seemed there was a question as to whether the owl was working. Can you give me the thumbs up if you can hear me, or indicate by saying yes? Okay.
Yes.
Good. All right, very good. All right, our first order of business is to review the open space committee. Could we get the charter pulled up and head to 3-14-8, please?
I'm not a host.
Michelle, could you make, Rob a host, please? Are now October's Rob.
All right. Um, Dave, is the owl working in a different way tonight than it has in the past?
I'm not sure. What's happening on your end?
So it appears like a regular Zoom meeting with everyone tiled. I don't see the room. Do you know what I'm?
Yep.
Do you
No,
know
I
what
do
mean?
know, I do know what you're saying. Let's, see if maybe it's an issue here. How's that, Rob?
That's it. That's much better.
Very good. And now we're all gonna disappear for the chart.
Yeah, no, everybody's gonna disappear for the charter. Give me 1 second.
I think we're good. I think we got it under wraps now.
Yeah, I'm not touching it.
While Rob's pulling that up, I'll note that you folks have several handouts in your packet, tonight. Among them is the current version of the red line charter. There are several handouts that we'll go through, here tonight. And while Rob's pulling that up, I'm gonna see if I can hop over to it and just start reading it out myself.
Yeah, it's line number 858
858, thank you.
on page 30.
858, all right, so 3-14-8 reads, an open space committee comprised of 9 persons to act in an advisory capacity to the planning board and the town meeting with respect to the preservation of natural open space shall be appointed as follows. 5 members shall be appointed to the planning board, 2 by the select board, and 2 by the conservation commission. The open space committee shall report its activities and recommendations directly to town meeting at least once each calendar year. So, there's a request that we add in an additional, partial sentence. Deb, if I'm right, you wanted that to go in before, the appointment piece, correct?
Before the piece that you just read, yes.
So the new language would read, an open space committee comprised of 9 persons to act in an advisory capacity to the planning board and the town meeting with respect to the preservation of natural open space in order to protect the environment and ensure appropriate access to public lands shall be appointed as follows. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a motion to that effect?
I will move.
Ms. Votrain has motioned to add that language in. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Lawler seconds. Is there discussion on the matter?
So that's going at the end of. I'm confused because the handout we have has section 7 open space committee. And then in the charter,
Don't worry about that handout yet. So that is, you're talking about this one, right?
yeah,
This is gonna be for a later part of the discussion.
okay,
So we're not following the language here on this.
Okay.
It's, I'm pulling this directly out of the charter right now.
so that addition is at the end of this section, correct?
Correct. Well, no, it's smack dab in the middle.
To present, sorry if I don't remember your name, use the word appropriate. And I have a question about whether or not. How do we define the term appropriate in this setting?
Larry?
I'm suspecting that that's one of those words that doesn't have any specific meaning and it probably doesn't have any harm.
Okay. Steve?
I'll just point out that again, the language of this section is very clear in that it talks about the open spaces role as an advisory body to, and this says the planning board and town meeting. I might actually suggest we add and the select board, since the select board appoints. I think the open space committee, given its role in town, should be advising at least those three bodies, all representing the townwide elected bodies, or the main townwide elected bodies.
Larry,
I'm wondering why they left it out originally. I mean,
the select board, you mean,
the-
or this piece?
yeah, no, this piece is innocuous, but advising the select board, but I don't see a problem in advising. I mean, we all spend our time advising the select board in our own way, so I think Mr. Bolton's point is well taken.
So I would ask to amend the language to include select board. Maybe,
Steve, does the open space committee go in front of A&F?
They would if they are supporting an article, right? You folks have done that in the past?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
You go in front of A&F?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
but they're not, everyone technically is advisory to A&F only up at they can't, in other words, these are the three bodies that act, the three bodies that are responsible for setting policy with respect to open space. So these are the three bodies that I think that they should be at least specifically advisory to. It's just my thought.
Yeah, process wise, they're gonna have to go before you guys anyways.
You're right.
And you folks are an advisory board to town meeting as well, so,
And to ourselves.
and to the whole town. Okay, so Rob, could we, on line 783?
Yep.
Can we do, I don't care who's over here,
Select board first.
I think, so can we do, after to the, can we add the words select board?
Why is his line numbers different than what we were given?
This is the active charter.
No, it's not. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna need to work off of this, this is the latest version that I have. I was not at the last meeting. For some reason, I am not able to load up the red line version that we received today, so.
Okay, let's pause then for a second, Rob. Michelle, can you pull up the charter then? Cause I wanna work, I wanna make this easy for moving forward. I just wanna work from a single document. Michelle had to go in, retype some of our work, in the document earlier today, so I don't wanna repeat that process.
Okay.
So let's work from Michelle's charter, if that's all right with everyone.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure.
We love the idea of adding a select board in there. Just wondering if, since the Conservation Commission also appoints a couple of our members, do we need to add that? Like, would it be conspicuous by its omission?
They don't set policy though. And they are,
These are, yeah,
they're
elected,
an adjudicatory body, so.
Okay,
these are the elected, all three of them are elected.
Bodies.
got it. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that
No,
crossing the Ts and.
a good point, but my thought was these are the elected policy-making bodies.
Makes sense.
Related to open space. Can you zoom in, please, Michelle? A little more, please. Can everyone see this, or do you want to go in a little more?
That's fine.
I'm
Good. All right. So Michelle, select board, comma. Planning board, comma. And I don't think we need the other, do we? Town meeting? Just town meeting?
We can refer to as representative town meeting throughout.
We've done a little bit of both, I think.
Do we have a preference as to how it will look uniformly when we decide to go through this?
I think we've leaned towards the representative town meeting. So can you put in the representative town meeting? With respect to the preservation of natural open space in order to protect the environment and ensure access to public lands.
Don't get appropriate, please.
But change public to appropriate.
appropriate
Appropriate.
access to public lands.
There were two public sections.
Gotcha. Um. Anything else discussion? Well, first of all, Martha, would you maintain your motion, and Mr.
Yes.
Lawler, would you maintain your second?
Yeah.
With the amended language, Mike?
So I have a question about. Report its activities and recommendations directly to town meeting at least once each calendar year. So. I think we have, there's an article on the town meeting warrant that says accept committee reports. And it's just housekeeping and it just gets voted. But I've never actually, that I can remember, never actually seen a report from one of these committees.
Larry?
I know the answer to this.
Oh, super.
Town report,
Huh?
that's the town report.
Oh, it's the town report? That's what it is?
Yeah, that's all of those, all of that, there are, I think, I don't know, 43 instances of state law and town law that said that it's necessary to report to town meeting. And that it's taken care of. The town meeting would go on for 6 days if we have to listen to it.
Well,
But That's
no,
why.
I get that, but I guess it says, report directly to town meeting.
Right,
Why
and
don't they just say, put it in the town report?
because they gives them the choice if they want to stand
All right,
up.
I'm good.
Thanks, Mike.
Just glad to have you back, Mike.
Any further discussion on the proposed changes to open space committee? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bolton, your vote?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote?
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Levin?
Yes,
Mr. Pizer?
Yes,
Ms. Botrain?
Yes.
Mr. Zuparelli?
Yes,
And I vote yes, the motion carries with 9 in favor plus our alternate. Completely unanimous. Very good. Thank you for being here, Deb, and your crew. You're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to boogie out of here and enjoy the weather.
we'll get more exciting.
Dave,
Yes, Martha.
before they leave, I forgot to mention that this doesn't say that it's a 3-year term. Should it say that in there someplace?
We could certainly add that. Is that in practice how you folks have been appointed for 3 years?
Yeah, I don't even know what the term is. I just wrote 3 years.
It's either 2 or 3 summers, if you, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you wanna leave that within the committee's function?
Well, so
no, it should be.
it should be, I agree. Is the difference between a 3-year and a 2-year term based on who appoints?
I'm not sure. I don't know, because that.
oh, I see what you're saying, is who, if it's a planning board,
I think it should be 3-year overlapping terms.
That's common. I
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah. Do you folks have any objection to us putting in 3? Excellent. Would you make a motion, Martha, to add on into,
And that language.
add the language that Michelle has just typed? Shall be appointed for 3-year overlapping terms as follows. I don't think you need to comment, Michelle.
So move.
Thank you, Martha. Mr. Lawler, you second? Second. Very good. Does anyone have any discussion on the matter?
Just a question as we think about, it. Are these overlapping terms per board? Or per appointing authority, if you will? So you've got 5 people from,
Meaning 1. Oh, yeah.
so you'd have, if they overlap to 3, then who else? So we have to have all of them overlapping as you go through. I mean, it's a 9-person board.
Yeah.
So obviously, there just needs to be arranged that the appointments are 3, 3, and 2. But I guess if it says overlapping, that should be sufficient.
Yeah, so what will happen is, I think in practice, there'll probably be 3, so 1 year will be 3 from the planning board. No, 1 year will be 1 from each, right? year two will be one from each. And then year three will be just three from the planning board.
I think that's how that might work as a practicality.
Tim?
So to eliminate confusion. Why don't we just follow suit, keep suit going, and have that a function within the committee?
Well, because the appointment comes from external from the committee. The committee itself doesn't do the appointments. I think we let these three bodies hash it out themselves, though, to your point though, Tim, right? Let the
Yeah.
bodies themselves figure it out, the
Yeah.
appointing authorities.
Yeah.
But they will be three-year terms.
Yeah, I
but
think
they
so.
can Decide
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yeah, there's nothing on the website about any kind of, you know, the terms or anything. It just says who they were appointed by.
We all good with that? Larry?
Historically, I can't name them right here, but there are other committees where this has happened. And it's simply a matter of cooperation
Yeah.
among the appointing
Right.
authorities.
That's unheard of.
Oh,
It's probably the
yeah.
staff that's coordinating
Be
it,
surprised. Yeah.
and the bodies themselves are just making the decision. Any further discussion on the matter? Anyone online? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bolton?
Yes.
Mr. Hammond, if you had a vote?
Yes.
Ms. Kavako is not present. Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer,
Yes.
Ms. Votrani,
Yes.
Mr. Zuparoli,
Yes.
and I vote yes, the motion is unanimous. All right, thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Very much.
We'll move on now to the school committee, which is section 3 of chapter 4, Michelle.
You're not doing.
You're not gonna do LUAC?
Oh, I skipped LUAC because I checked it off as we were going, before we started talking. So we're at 3-14-9. You folks have in your packets, updated language proposed by, the Land Use and Acquisition Committee for, changes to the charter. So the new language would read, a land use and acquisition committee comprised of 7 members to act in an advisory capacity to the select board with the respect to the acquisition, conveyance, and disposition of real property by the town or its subdivisions, either pursuant to provisions of chapter 61 of the general laws, or in any instances as requested by the town manager on behalf of the select board. The members of the Land Use and Acquisition Committee shall be appointed for 3-year terms as follows. 2 members shall be appointed by the Select Board, 2 by the Planning Board, 1 by the Conservation Commission, and 1 by the Agricultural Commission. 1 by the Agricultural Commission and 1 by the Open Space Committee. Do we want to add the words overlapping?
I'd like to see the overlapping.
All right. Michelle, do you have that language as amended on here? Do you need me to reread it, Michelle? Michelle? Are you muted, Michelle? Yes, you're muted, Michelle. I'm gonna reread it, Michelle. A land use and acquisition committee comprised of 7 members to act in an advisory capacity to the select board with respect to the acquisition, conveyance, and disposition of real property by the town or its subdivisions, either pursuant to the provisions of chapter 61. I'm gonna actually add /61A/61B, because they are separate chapters of the general laws. Can you do /61A? No, sorry, it'd be keep 61. Then /61A. /61B. Thank you. Of the general laws, or in any instances as requested by the town manager on behalf of the select board. The members of the Land Use and Acquisition Committee shall be appointed for 3-year terms,
Overlapping.
overlapping terms, thank you. As follows. 2 members shall be appointed by the select board. 2 by the planning board. 1 by the conservation commission. One by the agricultural commission. And 1 by the open space committee. All right,
Can I ask you?
yeah, I'm gonna ask for a motion and we'll have some discussion on that.
Chapters plural.
Okay, instead of chapter 61, chapters, please. Add an S to the end of chapter. Thank you.
So if that's gonna be the case, it should be commas rather than
Yeah,
slashes.
we'll do commas instead of slashes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Or 61B. Len and Mike,
For clarification for me, are these people that are being appointed, are they members of those committees or they can be anybody?
they're appointees, so they're not designees. So they'd be someone else, although I suppose it could be someone from within the committee.
Okay.
Other, Mike?
Can you tell me the difference between real estate and real property?
There is none.
Well, does real property include,
That is personal property.
was that
That's personal property. I suppose, well, let me
personal?
rephrase, there is a difference between property and real estate. Real property could also include like. If we buy a parcel that's, 61 Old Sandwich Road, and there's a giant rock that says 61 Old Sandwich Road, that's. Doesn't have like a family name on it, that could be real property, because it's associated with the
So
parcel.
it doesn't include what you
No.
just called personal property?
Correct.
Okay,
Is that fair?
Very much. Whereas the distinction of typically real estate includes structures where real property is typically intended to be just land.
No, because it can include it can include those structures. Because the structure is part of the real property, once it's an approved property.
well, you're getting to the question I had, what's included under this umbrella of real property? Because I don't think we want
Anything that's nailed down,
we
essentially.
don't want the committee worried about tables and chairs.
Yeah, it's not table and chairs, anything that's nailed down, so the structures or
Okay.
those are typical things, like I said, Gail's trying to FaceTime me at the moment. Those things that like an identifying marker for a property, that's part of real estate, or real property.
Or for example, if there's property not with a residence or a habitable structure, but a tower on, for example.
Yeah. Anything that's an improvement to the property, but not stuff that's inside of those beds and.
So then basically the restriction, if I understand it, is that they're not gonna advise on a structure alone. They would only advise on the structure that was already part of property.
Yeah, they're not gonna talk about building something, yeah, for sure.
Like the water barn.
Yeah.
Yeah, why didn't they tore that damn thing down?
Any further clarifications needed? Questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Alan.
back at line 845, I don't know if that was complete. I think you said or its subdivisions, and I was wondering. was wondering if you could give me a definition of a subdivision of the town.
So Michelle, on line 845, it should say, or its subdivisions. The town or its, after that is subdivisions. And then you also need the word either in there. Either pursuant, no,
Mhm.
you need the word either. After subdivisions. Thank you. Subdivision. Go ahead, Alan.
I was just gonna ask for an example. Is that a department? Is that a department that might have a piece of property that they don't have a use for?
Yep.
What's an example of a subdivision?
Yeah, it could include departments, Mr. Bolton suggests committees as well. Is there anything else that you would think of?
Boards, committees, commissions. Basically anything that is formally created by the town to carry out town business.
Anything that's part of the formal structure of the town, but smaller than the town itself.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, any further clarifications? Just let it go there.
The question of subdivisions. Is that necessary?
I don't think it's necessary.
I mean, the town owns property, and the subdivisions of the town don't own property.
But it's,
Well, they do,
they
like,
do,
like the select board owns property, the treasurer collector owns property, yes.
Treasurer collector's property is owned by the select.
No, it's under the care and custody of the treasurer collector until she turns it over to the select board.
I'll also go with
The fire department does, the school committee, the school's own property. I bet,
It's not, I'm gonna follow your original advice and let it go, but not,
I
yeah.
bet if you go into the assessors records, you will find other departments that own property in town.
But it's owned by the town.
Yep.
Rather than.
But
Okay,
various bodies make recommendations to the select board. This allows LUAC to assist those bodies in making those recommendations.
I do agree with you though, Larry. I think it's superfluous. And in fact, I think it might be actually antithetical to the original intent, which is to provide the town manager and the select board with further advice, because ultimately they're the ones that are gonna have to sign that purchase and sales agreement.
But it's at the request of the town manager.
Yeah, and this is requested by the town manager and the committee, so I'm inclined to just leave it in. Further discussion? Do I have a motion to approve the amended language?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Waller makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Paisley makes a second. Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bulletin,
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello,
Yes,
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Waller.
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Paisley,
Yes.
Mrs. Botrain,
Yes,
Mrs. Zubrolo,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Very good. Thank you, folks. Welcome to stay again. You're welcome to go.
Appreciate the rapid handling.
All right, very good. I'm also getting a text from, our, amazing staff support to say that Conservation Commission also owns property. All right, moving on to chapter 4, section 3, the school committee. When we last met with, the school committee, I believe Michelle was the only one in attendance at the time. I think when we went through, she indicated that the perspective was that it was worded properly here in the charter. Do you have any?
Yeah, we didn't have any concerns or things with Colin, which are here if you guys have any questions or. We don't have any issue with what.
So I'll just read through the line by line for this section. 4-3-1 reads the school committee shall have all powers which are conferred on school committees by law, this charter, by law, or otherwise, and not inconsistent with the grant of powers conferred by the general laws. Go ahead, Larry.
Doesn't mean anything, not necessary. you know, do we need that section?
It literally covers everything, so.
It says they do what they're permitted to do as opposed to what,
Right,
yeah.
would you like to make a motion?
Without any thought that we're diminishing the role of the school committee, I would move to eliminate 431 in its entirety.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Lawler makes the second. Is there discussion on the matter? Go ahead, Tim.
Well, at least, or otherwise, and I'm not inconsistent with grant powers and by the general laws, I mean, again, even that is. Yeah, it's encompassing. But it's already stated.
Yeah, I wonder what the phrase by law means.
Bylaw?
Well, no, it says, conferred on school committees by law.
Oh, by law.
This charter, by law.
Right.
Oh, like it's not like
Right.
No, I think by law would probably refer to general laws.
Right.
Under the general laws, this charter, by law or otherwise, and I'm not sure otherwise how you get powers, and are not inconsistent with the grant of powers conferred by the general laws.
That actually gives them almost unlimited power.
But not only that, but you say not inconsistent with, but I don't know what constitutes an inconsistency with
Right.
the powers in the general laws.
Rob?
So is this another case of making change for the sake of making change? Because if if this has been reviewed, the section, and if the section has been reviewed and approved, then I don't see a need to make any changes in this.
Thank you, Rob. Tim?
This is going along with our general format of cleaning things up and making things better. And that's what we've been doing. And I think we should continue along those lines, cleaning up and making this document make sense.
Thanks, Tim. Is there any follow-up? Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, and it also, to me, it's circular. It says something and then it comes back and says it again. I mean, in my mind, it is redundant. I mean, we don't have to define something that's defined by a different set of procedures, processes, laws, whatever.
Yeah, and I'll note for the public watching at home, if we do vote in favor of this and it's adopted by town meeting, it will change nothing about the powers conferred upon the school committee. Mike?
Well, I think I'm being consistent when I say that the average citizen reading this would be totally confused by the last, 10 words in there, but if you put a period at the end of bylaw, not by law, but bylaw, put a period there and knock out all this otherwise stuff. It makes it a lot simpler.
Hold on, let's
And easier to understand for the average person looking at this document.
Yeah, so we can, if this fails, I'll look to someone else that's just acting as an alternate tonight.
I can't make a motion.
We'll take up a secondary motion if this motion fails. Tim, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, to reiterate, I think we should remain consistent in our due diligence of cleaning things up. And I'm gonna go along with what Larry said.
All right. Steve?
I'll echo that, just to say that if we include this language here, then we theoretically should be including it in every section for every provision of the charter that says everybody will always have every authority that they're allowed to have. Which is,
Thanks, Steve. Joe, I saw your hand go up, but it went down. Did you want to say something?
No, that's okay. Thanks.
Okay. Hearing and seeing no further discussion, I'll call the roll on the elimination of 4-3-1. Mr. Bolton?
yes.
Mr. Hammond, if you had a vote?
No.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
No.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes,
Mr. Pizer,
Yes.
Ms. Botrain,
Yes.
Mr. Zubroli,
No,
and I vote yes, the motion carries with 7 in favor, 3 in opposition, including one of our alternates. Very good, we'll continue on to 4-3-2. The powers and duties of the school committee shall include the following. Just funny because we just talked about this. To appoint a superintendent of the schools who shall manage the school system in a fashion consistent with the law and policy determinations of the school committee. And upon the recommendations of the superintendent, the school committee may also establish and appoint positions of assistant or associate superintendents as provided by law. Messy. Larry?
If we're gonna be consistent, the word superintendent is capitalized in the 4th line.
Yep.
Should it be capitalized? A superintendent, I assume we're talking about a specific officer as opposed to a defined position.
Sure.
So I would,
so you're saying in the first sentence?
after A, to appoint a superintendent, that the word superintendent should be capitalized.
Yep. Is there any additional language changes that folks would make here? I think it's a little bit of a cluster. Len?
So just to make sure I'm clear, is that the assistant superintendent or whatever the exact title is, and there's a superintendent that's in charge of business, those are appointed by the committee or those picked by the superintendent?
So it's upon the recommendation, but the school committee establishes and appoints.
Okay,
The school committee establishes what?
They establish and appoint an assistant or associate superintendent.
Well, that raises a good point, and maybe that is your point. These are people who in a typical org structure would report to the superintendent, but they're not appointed by the superintendent. They're appointed by the school committee. So if I'm the superintendent, somebody's telling me, somebody meaning the school committee is telling me, these are your assistants. Isn't that a little?
Louis, you folks, the assistant and associate superintendents would be townwide functional, right?
Yeah,
Not
so-
school specific.
Correct. So this is kind of going to be when the establishment would 100% be approved by the students, by the school committee. So the superintendent can say, hey, I want to establish a position of assistant superintendent of buildings, whatever. He would make the recommendations, once it would be to approve the establishment of that position. Superintendent, in order to fill those positions, superintendent, can select whatever he wants, brings those people in front of the school committee for approval. So he is the one determining who's in those positions, but the school committee has, oversight, so he can just hire.
Is there a difference between, is there a difference between
An assistant and associate.
assistant and associate?
No, I think it's just, we don't have any associates, so ours is, so, I mean,
Would be okay if we just.
yeah, we need both there. It's, they have the same, to me, legal,
Well, but an associate could theoretically be a higher position that might have stronger responsibility within the town. Steve?
I'm actually going to use the positions of assistant or associate superintendents as provided by law. What law?
I think we use the national law, so.
Well, I'm looking, that's why I'm trying to find under Mass General Law, the position of assistant or associate superintendent. So I'm having a hard time finding that.
I don't think that the inclusion of that has any effect, right? Even if So let's assume that the general law exists, right? Let's just assume for a second that the general law exists. Not having as provided by law would have no effect on the process,
Yeah.
right? If the general law doesn't exist, then they can't do it. So I think, is your recommendation, Steve, that we remove those words as provided by law?
If the purpose is to allow, regardless as to whether, what the general laws say, is to allow the school committee to approve an assistant or associate superintendent as provided by the superintendent, then yes, I would think removing as provided by law would be the way to go. That's why I was asking what the purpose of that language was. It was to simply say, we're only gonna do it if the general laws allow for it.
Just in case.
Right. That's why I raised it.
Excuse me. I mean, is there a law that says the positions that they can, I mean, is there a law that does a personnel about who can work in?
Yeah, my point though is that if such a law exists, we still gotta follow it.
Right, if such a law exists, we're going to follow it. If such a law doesn't exist, then if we have complete discretion, then this charter would prevent us from exercising that
Right.
discretion.
Do you want to remove the word associate?
I would recommend that.
Not to mention, we've used the term associate as in other, as a non-voting or associate committee member who created that language versus an assistant superintendent, which would probably be a more apt title for.
So much we want to have the school committee govern that designation. I mean, so if the school committee comes up and says, let's make a associate now, it's their responsibility. And we're not having anything to do with it.
So my only concern about striking the word associate, first of all, we don't have any, so it's not been actioned upon at this point, but if in 20 years, we've got 15,000 kids in the school system and we have a need to divide it up in such a way that the superintendent needs more hands, I don't want to tie them by removing it from the chart.
Couldn't, if we don't mention it, couldn't the superintendent simply appoint a associate superintendent just because he has all sorts of power?
I suppose he could, but I think the school committee would want to maintain the ability to be the ones who essentially make the decision for appointment.
Yeah, I mean, so school committee approves any creation of any new positions.
Steve?
I just note that when we say positions of assistant or associate superintendents, I note that those are lowercase letters, meaning that is just merely the designation, then that's merely the level that they put at. The designation, how they want to be called. That's like saying, okay, is there a difference between an assistant principal or a vice principal? You can hire an assistant principal and call them the vice principal. They could be called vice superintendents. They can be called deputy superintendents. They could be called whatever the town would like to call them. I think this is merely establishing the level as an assistant to the superintendent.
I have Rob, then Mike.
I don't think, again, it's change for the sake of change, and I don't think we want to do that.
Thanks, Rob. Mike?
So the statement that was just made was that the school committee wants to approve new positions. And it seems that would be in their purview because it's a budget issue. They're controlling the finance. They're voting and approving the finances of the school department. The question I would raise is approving a position is different than filling the position with a human being. And that's the distinction I'm trying to make here. Approving the position, fine. The school committee wants to approve the position, that's a budget issue. Filling the position should be the superintendent's responsibility, notwithstanding the fact that the school committee may want to retain that authority. Think about any corporation where you have a board of directors and you have a CEO. The board of directors doesn't tell the CEO to hire these people as your assistant vice, your vice presidents. That's left up to the CEO. So, I'm drawing a distinction between creating a position versus filling a position, and that this basically says the school committee shall also establish, okay, and appoint. Those are two different things.
I don't think we should take anything away from the school committee as far as appointment or anything like that, Mike. I mean, if you're suggesting to take something away from the school committee as to what their function is, I don't think we should do that.
Well, think about it. You were a CEO.
Yes, Jim.
Your board of directors is telling you, you need to hire this person. And you realize, well, I can't work with that person, or I don't think they're qualified, but the board is telling you to hire them anyway.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I am questioning.
But then can't that board fire the CEO?
Yeah.
And hire someone who will hire new people?
Of course they could.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
but that's not the way it's supposed to work.
Len, and then, Rob, is your hand still up or is that up against?
No, it's new.
Right.
Len,
If I understand clearly what you're, in my mind, it's the issue of authority and responsibility. So I think this is just, providing at this level of the management of the schools. The school committee is providing some oversight. They're providing, a different perspective to this person that we're trying to hire to fill that role. So they have the responsibility for that, but ultimately the responsibility for that person's day-to-day, whatever, falls on the shoulders of the superintendent. So I think that's what this is saying. I don't think it's basically saying that that person works for the school committee. It clearly says that person is, they're just providing oversight to the selection of that person. Your example of a board of directors, believe me, there's plenty of places, and I've seen it, where the board of directors tells that person, that's the CEO, we want you to hire this guy to be the vice president of marketing. It happens every day.
Because he's my cousin.
Well, I don't know why, Mike, but the point is, it happens every day. And we could have a long discussion over beer about that, but that happens every day. So I think that's what this is doing.
Rob, and then Larry.
I have two things. One's a little procedural thing. While Len was talking, there seemed to be a side conversation going on. The microphone picked that up, and it made it difficult to understand what Len was saying. So if just for the sake of those of us who are not in the room, if we could limit those side conversations, that would be appreciated. And thank you. Secondly, in the structure of school committees, boards of educations, the school committee and whatever it's called, whatever that body is called, they can and sometimes do have the authority over everyone in that department. Most often it's the superintendent that reports directly to them, and the superintendent and the board school committee, they do have the most interaction between each other. But honestly, if it were to ever come to it, and let's just say a teacher needed the support of the school committee or the board of education, the school committee does have the authority in most cases to either support or not support that teacher. So it trickles all the way down. And I think so there's that we need to keep in mind. And I also think that we need to keep in mind that the school committee, with the superintendent's recommendation, is going to create, recommend, and fill positions as they're needed. And, just from my own experience, working in a city, there's a number of levels of superintendent, deputy superintendent, assistant superintendent, and associate superintendent. Now, we can have the conversation about top-heavy administration all day long, but each one of those positions has different roles and responsibilities according to their title. So I don't think we should be limiting the school committee in the positions that they can establish in order for the simplicity of language. Again, it's change for the sake of change, and if this has been reviewed, we don't need to change it.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank
I
you.
think that could be said for every element of the charter, though, so I don't think that we're engaging in an exercise of change for change's sake. I think this committee has been diligent in reviewing every single line of this charter, and I'm proud of the work that folks have done, including yourself, so don't downsell yourself. I think Larry has some updates on the general law.
Yeah. Chapter 43, section 32 says the school committee shall elect the superintendent of the schools annually, except as provided in another chapter, and may appoint, suspend, or remove at pleasure such subordinate officers or assistants, including janitors of school buildings, as it may deem necessary. So I think we understand that the school committee has the power to appoint under Massachusetts general laws. If I'm reading 432, we're establishing a Plymouth clearer definition of how things are going to proceed. That, yeah, the school committee has this power, but if the superintendent wants an assistant or associate superintendent, he has to go to the school committee specifically and say, I want that appointment. My feeling is that leaving this as it stands probably is the wiser.
Yeah, my sense is that there's not consensus on changing the language beyond adding the uppercase letter in line 938. So I'm gonna ask folks to, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the amendment to 4-3-2A, making superintendent an uppercase letter S. Proper noun, I guess.
You need a motion?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Mr. Kaiser makes the motion.
I'll
Mr.
second.
Levin makes the second. Is there further discussion on the matter? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bolton,
No.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
All we're changing is an S?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Piver,
Yes.
Ms. Votrain,
Yes,
Mr. Zuccaroli.
What are we
Rob?
voting on? What are we voting on? I needed to step away.
No problem. It's just, we're simply making superintendent, please, you're out of order, Mr. Bolton. We're making the word superintendent a proper noun in this case.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Golden, I vote yes. The motion carries with 8 in favor and 1 abstention, or excuse me, 1 against. All right, let's move on to letter B, to establish educational goals and policies for the schools in the town consistent with the requirements of law and statewide goals and standards established by the Board of Education.
It's harmless.
That's what we do.
Hearing and seeing no changes, I'll move on to C. To propose and oversee the administration of an annual operating budget for the school department, subject to appropriation by the to put the word representative in there, representative town meeting. Is there a motion to add the word representative to line 947. Mr. Pizer makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Votrain makes the second. Is there any discussion on the matter?
We're pretty representative between D and town.
Correct. Hearing and seeing no further discussion, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bulletin.
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
Yeah,
Resounding. Ms. Cavaco is absent. Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Are we okay, A, B, and C right now?
We're on B right now. I'm sorry, we're on C right now. C right now.
A, B, and C.
No, we've done A, we've skipped B. Now we're just doing C, adding the representative town meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer,
Yes.
Ms. Votrain,
Yeah,
Mr. Luparoli,
Yes,
and I vote yes, it's unanimous. Thank you. I assume there are no further changes?
I have a question about D.
Well, let me read D.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then you can ask your question. To have general charge and superintendence of all school buildings and grounds and furnish all school buildings with proper fixtures, furnitures, and equipment. Len, and then Steve, did I see your hand as well? Len, go ahead.
So in the future, if there was ever an effort to create a quote facilities organization for the town that took care of things and would remove the responsibility of cutting the grass, painting the buildings, the custodial staff, all those non-mission critical responsibilities of the school committee. If this section is left in there, would you think that would preclude them from being able to do that?
Yes.
So I move that we delete section D.
Hold on, before we take a motion, I'll go Steve and Larry and Martha. Just go down one.
Sections A, B, and C are slightly expanded wording of Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 37, powers and duties, which talks about the school committee in each city and town and each regional school district shall have the power to do, and it literally goes through the first three things we've gone through. This is an addition that is not part of the general laws, so only Plymouth. And as far as this charter goes, there may be other towns that do it differently, I don't know, but as far as those towns that follow the general laws, they do not have this section. And I think that part of the reason may be for the reason that Mr. Levin just stated, is that in many instances, other bodies are likely to handle exactly what it is that we're talking about, which is the furnishing, maintenance, et cetera, of school property. So by definition, this creates a requirement that the school committee has its own staff to direct, because the school committee can't direct the town side staff. So this literally sort of mandates duplicative services.
Larry, Martha, Rob, Mike.
I am smart enough to agree with Mr. Bolton, but not smart enough to come to the same conclusion. My understanding is that this is a pretty complex matter. The expenditure of funds by the school committee separate from the expenditure of funds by the municipal side. Those expenditures have consequences in a different way. I think leaving this in would require a useful discussion between the school committee and the select board. If they were to come to the conclusion that there should be an amalgamation of services. It isn't a simple matter. Therefore, if we left it in, we would understand that it's not a simple matter, and we know perfectly well that there are somewhat expeditious ways of amending the charter, so that if the two boards got together and decided that it was wise, you go to the legislature And within a year, probably you would be able to have this done. But in the meantime, I don't object to leaving it in.
Martha?
Basically, Larry has covered the 2 points that I was going to make, although I am thinking of how there is as recommended in the last, section of the charter, that there be a charter review committee at least every 5 years. So that to me covers the change that could possibly happen in the future of whether the school committee is in charge of their buildings and grounds or not.
Yeah, and I'd say in addition to that, the select board and or the school committee could support an article at town meeting and change the charter without the need for a charter review committee, so.
Well, that's another way around.
Yeah, so there are ways to work the charter,
Yeah,
as Larry said, expeditiously, I think is a generous word in this situation, but. You know, insofar as municipal government goes, I think you might be right. I have Rob, then Mike, then I'll add you, Tim.
And I'm back.
And then,
Am I up?
yep,
Am I up? Okay, this does not cover just the physical buildings. Cutting the grass, maintenance of the building inside and outside. This line does not just cover that. Keep in mind, it takes a lot to educate a child, and this provision covers, fixtures, furnitures, and equipment. We just came through, as an example, a global pandemic where school districts across the country went to a one-to-one, went one-to-one in terms of students and devices. If that could have been a very long and drawn-out process, were this provision not here, and not in our charter. It's not just the building itself, but it's everything that goes to other municipal buildings. They don't have 33 desks in a room. There is not a one-to-one device for every student. Smart boards, projectors, everything that needs to happen so that education can happen, so that teachers have the tools that they need, is not in every other municipal building. So, we've had this, we've always been having this. This is an ongoing conversation. The school department is a unique department within any municipality, and it has different needs and different requirements. Were there need to be a change in the future, there's a mechanism for that to happen. To take this out, I believe would limit what the school committee can do in terms of what needs to happen in terms of educating kids. So I would not support removing this line at all. As a teacher, I'm talking now as well.
thanks, Rob. Mike?
So, I understand Mr. Zuccaroli's point about educating children and all the things that have to happen, laptop, computers, smart boards, chalk, paper, pencils, all that kind of stuff. This paragraph is talking about all school buildings and grounds. And I'm fascinated and amazed that you brought this issue up. You made the leap between, it's called consolidation of services, I think.
Yeah, I lived in a town that did that, and it was very successful. Saved them millions of dollars.
Then why can't saving millions of dollars, Steve? So I'm totally in favor of consolidation of services. But if you leave this in here, it'll never happen. Right. So are we by taking this paragraph out, are we sending a message to the select board, the school committee? We want you to figure it out so that you're, consolidating services and saving millions of dollars.
Well, and town meeting too.
What's that?
And town meetings, they won't spend those millions. Tim, then Len?
Steve, could you repeat what you, first thing, Steve, could you please repeat what you said about this not being, this is unique to Plymouth.
Well, again, I don't know that it's unique to Plymouth, I haven't reviewed every town and what their city and what they do. What I can say is that the powers and duties, the overall powers and duties that are given to school committees under state law, under general laws, chapter 71, section 37. I'll read it. It says the school committee in each city and town and each regional school district shall have the power to select and to terminate the superintendent. That was A. Shall review and approve budgets for public education in the district. That's C. And shall establish educational goals and policies for the schools in the district consistent with the requirements of law and statewide goals and standards established by the Board of Education. And that was B. Then it talks about the school committee and may select a superintendent jointly if you have a joint district. And that's it. That's the scope that's required under the state law. So anything else that we have is an addition that we want for Plymouth. That's the response to your question.
So with that being said, Len, brilliant, Mike behind you, just think about it, the school committee, quote, environment, not being responsible for buildings and grounds. That sends a huge signal to eliminate this to the people, to what it should be. That, the school committee educates our kids, and the job of maintaining the buildings, the grass, etc. Not necessarily the internals of the school. I'm talking about the physical buildings, etc. And consolidating between town and school. That sends a huge message. I am very much in favor.
I'm gonna ask our esteemed vice chair of the school committee. I know you folks have done a lot of conversations in the past about shared services. I'm gonna ask you, because I don't know if you've had this conversation with the school committee, would you have any reservations about us removing from the charter?
I'll say the school committee has talked about this extensively and would have tremendous issues with it, and not because we're opposed to consolidation. We've had conversations between board members of the school committee and the select board, and I think both sides are in favor of consolidation. But I think it's but it is not a simple thing, so we would like to move in that direction, but it's gonna require a lot of collaboration, and we're looking at what parts of what we currently have responsibility for could be consolidated. I don't think it's not all or nothing. We have to do that. So the fact that this is in here is not preventing us from consolidating. It's with regards to consolidating, that it's a complex, problem to solve. So I don't see why having this would preclude us from continuing down that path. And then if we arrive at some agreement, whether it's, through town meeting, et cetera, to go through that consolidation. But my other view, if you don't have this here, then who is responsible then? Is this this isn't gonna change the fact that we are structured in a certain way right now. So taking this off of here, does that mean that now we're not responsible?
I have Len, Rob, Martha, and Steve.
I'm not gonna get into a big discussion sharing you with the town I lived in, it went through this. But my mind is, this does not change anything if you take it out. It's not gonna change how you operate every day, because guess what, there's nothing in place to do that. My concern with this is, oh yeah, we can easily change it. No, you can't. No, you can't. It's gotta go, it's a process. It will be used as a hindrance to not do it. The fact that instead of I understand it's a complex thing, because it just doesn't involve the school committee in the town that I was in. It was all things across the enterprise. So this could be, end up being used as a hindrance, say, oh, we don't have to do it because in the charter says the school committee gets to do it. And so by taking it out, it basically says, this is something we should do. You know, you listen to the town meeting, you listen to discussion about budgets and money and stuff. And I think it's really important that we basically take out any barriers to stop that process from happening. That's just my opinion.
Thanks, Len. I've just been informed that Steve dittos what you said, so I'm gonna go Rob, then Martha.
This has nothing to do with, I don't want to say this. This doesn't have anything to do with current conversations about the budget, about what's happening with the budget. This is a statement in the charter that has to do with long-range planning, and implementation of what needs to happen in a school department when it comes to education. The conversation and the discussions about consolidation between school and town, you know, it's ongoing. It has been happening. It is ongoing and it is continuing. Again, by taking this out, it's limiting the school committee in what they can do when it comes to providing certain kids.
Thanks, Rob. Martha.
I recall not that long ago when the town side wanted the school committee to take all of the responsibility for buildings and grounds. And because the school committee was doing such a good job as opposed to the town side. So I understand in your community, you said you saved a lot of money by letting the school committee, this work be done by the town side. In Plymouth, it sounds like maybe Plymouth would save a lot of money by having the school committee do all of it. But the school committee then, I don't think, wanted to do all of it. But anyway, I don't know all the details of that situation. But I don't feel comfortable at all dropping this part. But I would suggest that we put in some language like, and using the word may instead of shall. So that as consolidation happens, if it does down the road with parts of the buildings and grounds and maybe not the fixtures, furniture and equipment, I don't know what might be the end result, but that's my idea about.
I have Joe, oh, sorry. I thought you were-
About resolving our
Thanks.
discussion right here.
Thanks, Martha. I have Joe, then Tim, then Larry. Then Mike. Then Mike.
Wow.
Let's keep these, let's keep things to new comments, but go ahead, Joe, all you.
Okay, so chapter 70 was established to provide a level of distinction between powers of town administration and schools administration. And the reason is because in tough times, one of the easiest places to save money, in quotes, is by deducting from schools' budgets. And what this statement does is establish, I think, the ability of the schools to supervise. I'm not sure what superintendence is, but they have general charge and supervision of all school buildings, grounds, and then the accoutrements, the fixtures, furniture, and equipment. And that makes sense to me. And I agree with Mr. Zuccaroli that it empowers the school committees, and I think that's essential for a good educational model. I'd also like to know if Len is talking about a town in Massachusetts that established a convergence of services.
Yeah, Wakefield
Wakefield, Massachusetts, Joe.
was considered one of the best run towns in the state.
Follow up, Joe?
Yep, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
point of order, we, vote on Len's recommendation.
We haven't motioned yet, so I'm gonna let Larry and Mike go, and then Rob, and then I'm gonna ask for a motion.
I, in a strange set of events, agree with the idea of saving money. You know, I mean, I pay taxes along the way, just, you know, maybe more than some people. But what I think we're doing here is carts and horses. The foundation budget that the state uses for giving out funds is something that includes buildings and grounds. And before we toy with this on our own, I have no question that this could work out. What I'd like to see is, I'd like to see the select board and the school committee come up with a plan first, with their high quality people, the town manager and the superintendent of schools and their staffs. Then it's time to make the change. But I don't think that it's going to be a good idea for this committee with our, I mean, we all have good feelings about this sort of thing, but this is a huge change with a lot of different effects, and it concerns me that what we're doing is we're going over the head of the school committee and the select board to make policy. We're defining, I think our job is defining the structure of government and not to make policy. Thank you.
Agreed, thank you. Rob?
So the conversation, as I said earlier, the conversation about consolidation has been happening and is ongoing. Removing this is going to tie the hands of the select board and the school committee. And finally, this is Plymouth we're talking about, not Wakefield.
Excuse me.
Okay, hold on. We're not gonna get into a back and forth here. You're out of order with that, Rob. And we're gonna pause there, Len. What I'd like to do at this point is to take a motion. Yes, Mike, did I skip you? I did, I crossed your name off before, right?
I think it's fair to say that nobody in this room wants to have a negative impact on educating children. That is, well, I mean, I have a child, I have 3 grandchildren. It is one of the most important things that goes on in this town, just educating children. And I'm sitting here imagining the discussion and the debate at town meeting that needs to happen over this issue of consolidation. If we voted to remove this paragraph, think about the discussion and the debate that would happen on the town meeting floor about the issue of consolidation. Who's responsible for these buildings and who's going to take care of them? And can we save millions of dollars like the town of Wakefield is? Somehow we need to move the what? Yeah, we need to move the ball forward. And if moving the ball forward takes this committee making that recommendation to town meeting, then I'm in favor of it.
Thanks, Mike. Len, do you have a motion?
I have a motion to remove paragraph D of section 432.
4-3-2.
4-3.
I second that.
Mr. Levin makes the motion. Mr. Lawler seconds the motion. At my own peril, I will ask, is there further discussion on the matter? Mr. Bulletin?
Just one very quick point, and I appreciate everybody's discussions here, but it is a reminder, we're only making a recommendation. Town meeting will ultimately decide, and if the select board and the school committee get together and say, we don't think this is a good idea at this point, they can stand up and say so, and I guarantee the town meeting will follow that recommendation. I think that the point here, to follow Mr. Levin's point, is to remove an impediment. This doesn't necessitate change, and things can continue onward without a change. All this says is it doesn't have to be the school committee. Doesn't say that it can't be the school. It just says that we no longer have a provision that says you must have separate services. That's all that we're doing, and we're making a recommendation to town meeting that they consider that. Thank you.
Hearing and seeing no further discussion, I'm gonna call the roll. Mr. Bolton,
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
Yes.
Ms. Kavako is not present. Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson. Joe?
There.
Joe, you're muted.
No.
Thank you. Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer,
No,
Ms. Votrain,
No,
Mr. Zuparoli,
No,
and I vote yes. The motion carries with 5 in favor, 4 against, and our alternate also voted yes. All right, we'll move on to section 4-3-3. The school committee shall report on the state of the schools directly to, and Michelle has anticipated our needs and added the representative town meeting at least once each calendar year, and shall meet jointly with the select board as directed by section 3-2-8 of this charter. Aside from adding the representative town meetings, and Michelle is making the word section a proper noun, is there any additional change? Larry?
my only question is, when there are references to sections of the charter and the proposal for renumbering the charter, will that be a motion that will then?
Yeah, I think it has to be, but we could also take out the reference to another section.
But if I remember correctly, it shows up elsewhere in the charter, so.
Yeah.
We'll leave that for.
Yeah, but so just to give since we're on the topic, just to give a quick preview of what will happen at subsequent meetings, we're gonna start the organization of the charter, renumbering the sections. So I think what we should do is keep an eye out for these sorts of changes, and comb through anytime that we see a reference to a different section, that we make sure that it's appropriately numbered, given the changes that have been made to the charter. Any additional discussion or changes to this section? I feel like this is a pretty innocuous. Go ahead, Tim.
Does the school committee report to the town manager?
No.
No.
It says the representative town meeting.
At the meeting.
Yeah, Michelle gives the chair gives
Yeah, you go over any report.
yeah. Michelle has, also, and past chairs have stood up at the beginning of the fall town meeting to also give a report. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'd like to call for a motion to amend 4-3-3 by adding the words "the representative" before the words "town meeting" and by making the word "section" a proper noun. Mr. Levin makes the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Lawler seconds. Is there any further discussion on the matter? I'll call the roll. Mr. Bulletin.
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
Yes.
Ms. Kavako is not present. Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Levin.
Yes.
Mr. Pizer.
Yes.
Ms. Votrain.
yes.
Mr. Zuparoli.
yes.
And I vote yes. The motion carries unanimously. Very good. Thank you for being here. You're very welcome to stay. But there's still some daylight, so get out there and enjoy the weather if you so choose. Thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is the proposal of a new section. I'm actually making this a proposed new chapter. You will have a packet in your packet, I'd say it's probably a 6-page document that describes chapter 8. Now, what I want to do here is, I want to recognize that the language that's reflected in this new chapter is out of date as of now, because we've amended several of the bodies that I put into this chapter. So, what I would like to do is, rather than reading through it line by line, I want to explain to you folks, my rationale for doing this, my rationale for putting each of these bodies in, and then if there is a motion, what I'd like the motion to be is that we move these bodies as amended through our process into a new chapter 8, rather than focusing on the language here, let's focus on the organizational aspect of it. So, chapter 8, as I've created it, contains, I think it's 7 or 8 new sections.
Dave,
10
excuse me,
sections.
excuse me,
Yep.
Dave. That chapter, that's in the packets. Was that sent out digitally?
I believe it was, yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, somehow or other I missed it. I never saw it till.
It was sent out today.
It was sent out the other day too.
No, this one was sent, this
Oh,
one
I'm sorry.
specifically was sent out today. So, it has 10 sections. I've included the committee of precinct chairs, the advisory and finance committee, the school committee, which we just worked on, the open space committee, the land acquisition, use and acquisition committee, the building committee, and our committee, the charter review committee in this section. So what I did was I looked at the charter and saw that there were a number of ostensibly independent advisory bodies that report to the town meeting, to the select board, to a whole variety of boards and committees throughout the town. But they're separate from the branches of government in which they were placed by the existing charter. So just as an example, committee of precinct chairs, we have conflicting opinions, but the most recent opinion from the Attorney General's office is that it is a public body and therefore separate from town meeting, because town meeting is exempt from the open meeting law, meaning they're not a public body as defined in that law. So that's why I pulled that board out, that committee out. Advisory and Finance Committee is an advisory body that gives recommendations to town meeting, but really it vets all legislative action in the town. They are appointed by the moderator, who is not a member of town meeting. We have, well, we're gonna talk a little more later about the appointments process, but we've in theory, at least in principle, said that we're gonna create an advisory and finance committee, appointment committee, but they're separate from town meeting, which is the legislative body. The school committee, which we've just talked about, is currently, I believe, in chapter 4. Chapter 4 of the charter is elected boards and officers. It doesn't include any of the other elected boards and officers in town, which is why I pulled that out of that section. The Board of Health was in the executive section, but is most certainly not an executive body. Although it does have adjudicatory authority, so there are other executive bodies that do. I pulled out open space. This was previously, I believe, in the planning section, and youth and acquisition as well. And the building committee. And then lastly, I took charter review committee and put it here because I think it makes sense to be with the, simply because we've created the section, I think it makes sense for it to be here. Are there questions, comments, thoughts about this? I'll go, Mike, then Steve, Tim, Larry, Martha. Mike, Steve, Tim, Larry, Martha, then Rob. Mike. Steve, Tim, Larry, Martha, Rob. All right, go ahead, Mike.
I get your point about, putting all these, some various and sundry committees in one section. Because it's not the legislative, chapter 2 is the legislative branch, section 3 is the executive branch. But you just made the comment that these are not executive committees like the Board of Health. I would, I question the school committee.
Mhm.
Seems to, and they are in chapter 3 with the,
They're in chapter
with the
4.
Board of Selectmen.
No, they're in chapter 4. They're the only,
I thought I just said,
they're the only elected board that's described in section 4.
in chapter 4, then, okay, then I think that's appropriate.
So section 4 does two things. It establishes how, when this charter was first put into action, how they were gonna get all these boards elected. Then goes on to talk about the holding of multiple elected offices. So I think that section is appropriate for those things, but to me, the school committee was just kind of thrown into that section.
Yeah, I mean, think about the fiscal responsibility that the school committee has, it's huge. And, you know, they effectively are running a little business there, just like the selectmen are running the city. So I agree with the Board of Health and FinCom and, all the other stuff in here, the committee of position chairs. I just question whether the school committee, because of their unique status, shouldn't have their own section
Or
You're
move
saying
them to
they should
section
be in their
3.
own section.
or move to section 3. But the executive, the weird thing about the way we talk about it, we talk about the town. And then we talk about the school board and the school committee as if they're not part of the town.
Right.
And so I think it is appropriate to have a select board in the executive branch town government. And then maybe leave the school committee in chapter 4.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to that, just an informal poll. Who would prefer to see it stay in chapter 4?
I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, you say chapter 4, I mean, section 4, what chapter?
No,
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. It's in chapter 4, so it's
Okay.
section 3 of chapter 4.
Oh, what we were just talking about, sorry, my bad.
So Martha and Larry and Mike prefer to see that?
Well, I would like to say, this is a big, huge discussion. To me, talking about all of these committees and how we're gonna reorganize the whole charter, and I support that. But I don't wanna do it all tonight. I hope that isn't the plan.
So what's the plan?
Oh, well, I'm not ready for that, and I don't, is everybody else ready for that?
It is a basic
We've
question.
all gone through the whole charter and looked at gone through this.
Well, it doesn't make any substantive changes.
It's an organizational change.
It's organization.
Yeah, it's not making any changes to it, it's just the organization.
So so Mike, did you have any follow-up?
I'm done,
Steve?
unless she's stealing my papers.
And I don't think that chapter 4 makes sense because chapter 4 had its own purpose, which is more generally administrative. So I think that moving the school committee, which is extremely important, to a section where it can be readily found makes sense. So if people feel that moving it to a chapter in which it is just one of many seems to diminish the school committee in somebody's estimation, and that's again, an optics thing, and we still have to be mindful of optics when it comes to that. Then the alternative suggestion would be to move it to chapter 3, to consider it as part of the executive branch.
Can I have a brief just
Please,
what would folks think about creating a separate chapter for the school committee
that would be
and
the other.
elevating it to its own?
They spent $180 million, so it's.
I also want to say, school committees are not charter created. Which is
No,
what
they are
this,
statutory.
so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take school committees out of this proposal. And then we're not gonna vote on what to do with the school committee at this time. But we're gonna leave school committee where it is until such a time as the committee revisits it.
You put me on your list.
All right, Steve, did you have follow-up?
other than to just making a sort of a structural suggestion, which is I note that you've got that the committee of precinct chairs still occupies 8-1, 8-2, and 8-3.
Yeah.
And I think it would probably be best from an organization, if the COPC was one section, each committee occupied its own section. Maybe you have more subsections underneath it. But I think just so that people can easily find something they know, if it says Committee of Precinct Chairs is section 1 of chapter 8, that's where they're going.
I think that's fine. I don't think so again, the motion I'm gonna entertain is to bring these groups into a new chapter. And then I think we can revisit the organization of numbers, when we do the renumbering piece.
Sounds good.
I have, you done?
I'm done.
I have Tim, then Larry.
I'm piggybacking on Martha's point. And that is, did you change any of the language when you moved things over?
No, and when we take the motion, it's not gonna be substantive, it's just gonna be organizational.
All right,
So,
so none of the language has changed.
yeah, so what I'll say when I call for the motion is, I'll ask for a motion to, pull the bodies described under the proposal titled chapter 8, charter created public bodies into a new chapter 8, as amended by our previous process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Larry.
Trying to balance similarities here. I can see someone went to vote today, and on the ballot, there are a small number, even you voted today, and I voted yesterday, so this is the only reason I know this. Maybe not. There are a small number of elected bodies, and elected bodies are different from any of the other bodies in town. I'm trying to figure out how we can justify, other than by budgetary amount, and that's, there are so many other things that go into it that I'm not really accepting that. The planning board and the school committee are pretty similar. They have independent authority to do things, and separating them. I mean, select board might be special, because they're somewhat overarching, but they're not entirely overarching. They can't run the school committee. I get the feeling that elected bodies that have some sovereign authority, it might be better to have those as part of the organization. I mean, I like the rest of this, committee of precinct chairs, advisory and finance, board of health, all of those. But somehow it's possible that we should keep this idea of elected bodies together, and select board, planning board, school committee, maybe the two lesser ones, sorry for saying, but truthfully, the housing authority and the redevelopment authority. They do, their existence within the charter is different from any of the other groups within the charter.
Yeah. So we'll take that at a later date. I will assure you though, Larry, I've taken school committee out.
Okay.
So it will not be part of the motion. Good. Martha, Rob, then Len.
I don't have anything now.
All right, excellent. Rob.
No, I don't have anything. Michelle sent me the chapter.
Very good. Len.
I don't think where something falls in this charter diminishes its responsibility or authority. I think it is important that you I was new to this. I started looking at it, and I, again, put my engineering hat on and whatever else I have. And it just was all over the place. Things were just kind of like, oh, let's put this here. We're thinking about it. Let's add it in here. I agree with Larry. I mean, there's places where this is not, it's not executive, it's not legislative, it's just, it's committees that help us run this town. And I think making, we've talked about where you're gonna find stuff. Where you're gonna be able to, when the average person goes to read it. I think having a place that talks about public boards is important, that it's in one place and you can go see all of them instead of trying to find it, Yeah, this thing may be, maybe up on a platform where it's more easily searched than in the past. That's basically what my feeling is. And so I think the whole renumbering and structure and layout of the thing is very important to make it modern and easily to be able to look at and find out what things are.
So you're saying to keep it the way it is?
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry, I'm for this kind of taking all these and putting them in under something that's clearly defining what they are, as opposed to them having them be randomly throughout. I agree that there should be a chapter that says school committee. Because it is an important part of this, and that way, when somebody comes and looks at it, if they're looking for the school committee. Well, it's in this chapter here, and it's section here, and it's down here. It would be nice that it's bold and, it stands out and you can find it. And the renumbering will be interesting. I looked through this briefly when we got it the other day. There doesn't appear to be anything substantial, except for some minor things that we've done in the past with this. So it's just basically a structural thing for the charter. Thank you. You're welcome.
Mike and Steve.
yeah, I think Mr. Kaiser made an interesting point about, I think he used maybe the term statutory authority or something like that. And if you look at the title of this chapter, it's charter created public bodies, not not the state created public bodies like the Board of Selectmen or the school committee or the Board of Health. The Board of Health has statutory authority. So is that another group that really should be under the chapter 3, the executive branch, because they are appointed by the executive branch?
But towns don't have to have boards of health. They don't have to have a board of health. There are multiple ways that you can skin public health. Some have
I thought
elected
every
boards of
town
health,
had a
some
board
have
of health.
appointed boards of health, some of them selectmen can act in a function of boards of health. Some of them can
Okay.
have commissioner of public health.
Fine.
I do have a question now.
Yeah.
Well, it's-
Oh, hang on. I have Steve, then I'll come to you, Norfolk, sorry.
I hate to throw a monkey wrench,
Well,
but following what was just stated by Mr. Hamilton, we do have to have a finance committee.
We have an advisory and finance committee.
But if you look at Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 16. Appropriation, advisory, or finance committees, appointments, tenure, powers, and duties. So we do technically,
Does it say we have to have them?
every town whose valuation for the purposes of apportioning the state tax exceeds $1 million, we are shall.
All right. So I'm gonna remove advisory and finance committee.
But I do think, again, as we point out, it is an important enough committee. There may be a need to, and it could be that this, we actually just create other public bodies and we create one relating to statutory and another charter created.
Yep, I think that's why the person consider down the road. I have Martha now.
And so the conservation committee, as we found out, is established by state law. So
Not in here.
that's why, right, I noticed that it's not. And what about the zoning board of appeals?
It's state law.
41A.
It is too, okay. So going back to what Steve just said,
Further discussion. Len?
So are you suggesting that the advisory and finance committee be part of the executive?
I'm gonna take it out of this.
And not talk about it.
discussion, and I think it can be a topic for a later discussion if the committee so chooses. So what I have to do is.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Alan.
I apologize, but just for clarification, we're gonna vote just to have a chapter 8 with these type of items in it. We're not gonna go through each of the sub paragraphs now. Is that correct?
Correct. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask for a motion to include the committee of precinct chairs, the Board of Health, the Open Space Committee, the Land Use and Acquisition Committee, and the Building Committee, as previously amended by this process in a new chapter 8.
And then we'll have an opportunity to go through and fix some language, or at least discuss some language, is that correct?
No, we've already done the language throughout the process.
I'm sorry?
No, we've already done the language throughout the process.
You're just moving it from one place to another.
Yeah, we've already done the review of the language from each of those, Alan, so we wouldn't.
The question I had was 82-1, and being part of the legislative oversight, it seems a little broad. Can we tighten that up? I
That was already,
apologize. I just got this as well, so I'm trying to read it as quickly as I can for you.
well, that comes from the COPC, proposal that we reviewed, I think, in September or October. And the committee already voted to adopt. It doesn't preclude the committee from going back to the language, but we're not gonna do that here tonight.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yep. Martha?
Sorry, but I didn't catch all the committee.
Yep, I'll do it again. Larry?
No, I was gonna move.
Okay, so, I'm gonna ask for a motion to include the following committees as amended previously by this process in a new chapter 8. Those committees are the Committee of Precinct Chairs, the Board of Health, the Open Space Committee, the Land Use and Acquisition Committee, the Building Committee, and the Charter Review Committee.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Rob. Mrs. Agroli makes the motion. Is there a second?
Oh, there we go.
Mr. Piper makes the second. All right. Is there any further discussion on the matter?
The charter review in that.
Yes. Hearing and seeing no further discussion, I will call the roll. Mr. Bolton? Yes. Mr. Hammond, if you had a vote?
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson? Joe, you think you might be muted? Yep, you're muted, Joe.
Sorry, yes.
No problem. Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mr. Pizer?
Yes.
Ms. Botrain?
Yeah.
Mr. Zubrolo?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the committee has unanimously adopted the recommendation. All right, we will move on now to, we have 3 possible new bodies that were on the agenda. I'll note that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Martha, the Appointments Advisory Committee has been withdrawn.
Yeah.
For proposal. Excellent, thank you. We'll cross that one out. The first possible new body is the Advisory and Finance Committee Appointment Committee. Michelle, if you could go back to the Advisory and Finance section of the charter, I think it's 212.
That's the line number?
No, it's the section 2.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe in your physical packets, it starts on page 17. Oh, we did, Michelle, you have the edits, right? You finished typing in the, right now, our,
Looks like this.
yeah, so our printed copy says, see Steve Bolton's rewrite.
And
I know
there's
Michelle,
there's a free page. They're all looking at a page also that's not attached that has Steve's. It's in their red line. There's a floating page everyone has.
Yep, thank you. So, I believe, we are, looking at, 2-12-1A. As already voted by this committee, it states an advisory and finance committee of 15 members shall be appointed for 3-year overlapping terms. Persons not registered to vote in the town of Plymouth employees and elected town, county, and state officials shall not be eligible for appointment or service to the advisory and finance committee. We go on, where's the appointments piece? I believe we amended it to include in principle an advisory and finance committee appointments committee.
Yeah,
Did we not?
we did.
We did, we had a.
Dave,
we
it's on the
identified-
screen. David, it's on the screen.
There we are. Letter B.
It's this page here, right?
Yep, members of the advisory and finance committee shall be appointed or reappointed as may be applicable. That should be by, not BU. I don't think we need to revote that.
That's typo.
By an appointments committee, which shall consist of the moderator, who shall be chair, and one appointment and one appointee each. Oh, I think we've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're good.
Yeah, I
Mr.
think this
Waller?
is what we did.
Mr. Chairman. I know that we have, gone through section B.
Yep.
At one particular point, I disagree with this. I know there was, but I'm sorry, let me put it in front. I have since looked this over. And I disagree with this. I think there should be an addition to this nominating committee.
Okay, who do you think should be added to it?
I have, I'm strongly suggesting. That the chairman of the.
I won't entertain that. I'm sorry. It's not gonna, it's not appropriate to have a member of a committee appointing the committee, so I'm not gonna entertain that.
Is there a way that the chairman can be
No,
consulted?
no. It's not appropriate.
Can I ask him a question?
No, we're not gonna pursue it, so.
Okay, never mind then.
Is it a question about this?
No, what is,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
We also use the same configuration of appointees for the charter review committee.
Mhm.
So perhaps we may want to come up with a different name for this than just the advisory and finance appointments committee, but maybe we call this, I don't know. I'm looking at, but like an executive appointments committee or some sort of, some type of appointments committee. So that we have it as a body that is recognizing that it's appointing a couple of different things. With the idea that was suggested, as I recall, by Mr. Costello at other points, it could then later be used to appoint yet other bodies. Doesn't have to be in our charter, but other bodies could later, other committees, non-charter created committees could be created in which someone says, gee, why don't we use this group to also appoint them? So I like the idea of certainly creating it as a separate entity, but also giving it kind of this, not suggesting that it only exists for this purpose, but rather that it's an appointments committee. We know that by charter, it has to appoint these groups, but give it the option of appointing others if that's what someone wants to do.
Yeah, I think we can pursue that in a later conversation.
Okay.
I apologize for putting this on here. I thought we established it in principle and not in function. So I think we're good with that one. Let's move on to the redistricting committee. Martha has placed a proposal in front of you folks. It was in the email that Michelle sent out along with the agenda. It details a precinct advisory committee, which is to meet. I think the way it's written, in the year of the decennial census, or sorry, in the year prior to the decennial census. So, Martha, I'll give you the floor to talk about it, and then we can open it for discussion.
This actually comes from what was done for our most recent census and prior. Well, actually, at the time of getting the information and then trying to comply with the need to what then ended up to go from 15 to 18 precincts. And there was a committee, I wasn't on it, but I talked to people that were on it and they thought that it was a good process. And I support that process myself in terms of increasing voter turnout. It's known that if citizens are worried about gerrymandering or any sort of fiddling lines, even precinct lines. It can lead to decreased voter turnout, and our committee has talked about how we're interested in increasing voter turnout. And, is a very laudable goal. So one way to ensure transparency and increasing voter turnout is to have a precincts advisory committee. And so, I've lined it up like this, and did you want me to read it, or? Are there any
Let me ask you this question,
questions,
would you place this perhaps in the new created chapter 8?
Yeah, probably.
I can read, Martha's proposal says in every year, the precinct advisory committee, the first, clause is, in every year ending in a 9, there shall be appointed a precinct advisory committee of 10 members, 5 of whom shall be appointed by the select board, and 5 of whom shall be appointed by the committee of precinct chairs. The town clerk or the town clerk's designee shall serve as a non-voting member ex officio. The select board shall not appoint multiple members from the same precinct, and the COPC shall not appoint multiple members from the same precinct. Upon clause B says, upon request of the COPC or upon its own initiative, the select board and the COPC may appoint the precinct advisory committee as provided in subsection A as early as 5 years prior to the decennial precinct review. Clause C says the precinct advisory committee shall study the town's precincts and population prior to the release of the final results of the decennial federal census. Shall review the final results of the decennial federal census upon receipt, and shall propose any changes in precincts that the committee deems necessary to the select board. The precinct advisory committee shall hold 1 or more public hearings to solicit public input. Larry.
Okay, there are few sections of the charter, for which I hold, quite this much adamant nature. The idea of gerrymandering, we're already protected by gerrymandering. It has to pass the local LEDRC, local election district review committee of the state. And they are very careful to avoid gerrymandering. Second.
Thanks to Massachusetts, so.
That was a long time in Massachusetts. This is the function of the select board. And the select board, seems to me, ought to take full responsibility for this function. They made a choice 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and what's now 5 years ago almost, to how they want to conduct this, because they're the ones who make the presentation. Whatever advice they're going to get, they're the ones who make the presentation. I'm going to vote against having this committee at all. The select board has the ability to create any advisory groups that it wants to, because they're going to end up performing the responsibility. I'm sorry to say that section B, 5 years prior to the decennial precinct review, complete waste of time. You just can't do anything until you have the numbers that are going to be here. And let me tell you, we are almost at that 5-year point. Let's all get together. We'll make a date 5 years from now and say, oh, I guess Plymouth didn't grow the way we thought it was going to grow. So I understand the reason for this. I have a final concern. And my concern is that committees legitimately can be the place where people get their personal views put into place. That's not what we want when we're drawing precincts. the town clerk is not omniscient, but the town clerk, if we choose a good one, and we have, is going to create it's a very difficult process. I mean, all the rules and things that go into it. The town clerk is going to create a basic map, and the select board is going to, they always have had a public hearing. And there has never been a time when people who said, I'm not getting my way, that they haven't come to the public hearing and expressed things to the select board. I think that the problem with this is that it's more likely to cause problems than to solve them.
I have Steve, Mike, Tim, Joe, and Alan.
You're up. I'm going to agree and disagree with Mr. Kaiser. You have, as I recall, at least 4 members of this committee were on that other committee. So I recall the other, unless I'm missing somebody, there may be an addition, but I recall at least 4 of us. You seem to have a different recollection as to how that went than I did, because I think it went incredibly well. I think that in terms of creating precincts, it was my first experience in town government, seeing everybody come together and actually work remarkably hard not to put their own personal interests. I recall, in fact, at least 2 separate town meeting members who were re-precincted out of their precincts, and they made a point of saying, this, I understand, this is, I voted with these group of people for all of my, and now I'm not going to, and that's okay. I watched them actually be quite selfless in this process. It is an advisory process, but I can also say that given the growth of the town and given the constant changes and what we go through every decade, hearing voices from different parts of the town who have experience that I thought was invaluable to the process. I do agree with you that I think it is a select board issue rather than mixing the select board and the COPC. I think, again, the idea of you can certainly have town meeting members on it. I'm not going to oppose restricting that at all. I think that, but having town meeting members making designations of people to them does have sort of a smack of potentially, whether you want to call it gerrymandering or gerrymandering, since that was his actual name. But so I agree. I don't think COPC, and I absolutely agree with you that 5 years is meaningless. And in fact, even meeting before the census comes out is actually really not. So we can turn around and say, okay, the town has grown a lot. Well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to wait for the census, and then we're going to go through those section, block, and lot numbers again each time and look for those lines and figure out where the numbers are. Until we have final numbers, we actually can't do anything. So if you want to appoint this a year in advance and have it just sit vacant, that's one thing. But I think that having a body advise the select board in conjunction with the town clerk is a good thing. And I was part of it. I thought it was remarkably productive. I thought we created a much better product. And if you recall, we actually created one product first. And when the state came back and said, no, we're changing something, we went back and said, okay, we can do something that sort of fits that and just sort of half-heartedly do it. And we said, no, you know what? We're gonna go right back to the drawing board and we're gonna completely redo it because we want to get it right. Because we tried to squeeze something in to just limit the number of precincts. And finally we said, you know what? No. If we're going to do this, let's do this correctly. And that's how we came up with 18 precincts. Rather than 16 or 17, we said, if we're going to really try and make these recognizable precincts that have a real meaning, we're going to go through it. And we went through it an extra 2 times, as you recall, and we worked hard on that. And it was a group that, you know, and again, Mr. Costello, Mr. Zuccaroli, both were part of that, and we sat there around the maps and sharing it and asking each other, well, do you know this neighborhood? Who knows this neighborhood? Well, Mr. Cohan was regularly commenting, well, I know from history, this neighborhood votes with this neighborhood. And that was invaluable for all of us to basically say, and then there were the new neighborhoods, and we said, well, wait a minute, what about this neighborhood? And next time we're gonna be hearing more about what Red Brook does and other areas that are now growing. So I'm in favor of having this body, I just think it needs to be
So
polished a bit.
before I continue down the list, Martha, I had a similar thought to Steve about the timing of these committees. Larry, I'm gonna ask you a question. When do you typically receive the results of the decennial census? In the year of or year after?
December 31st.
Okay, would you be amenable to making it, instead of every year ending in 9, every year ending in 1? So that it starts the work when they have the results?
Yeah, and that's fine.
When you say December 31st, of what year?
Zero.
Of the census year.
Yeah.
You get it at the very end of the census year.
Yeah, that's the law. It wasn't followed the last time.
Yes, but typically,
That-
I wondered about that, okay, so
we don't need to go into
We
why.
have to go
So
by.
Larry, do you agree that ending in 1, I know you may not agree with the proposal, but
Yeah, if it's going to be, you
If it
would say
exists.
ending in 1 except, I mean, January, they can't do anything before January 1st. You could say December, just so that they could form, December 1st of years ending in 0.
I would just do it when we have it in hand,
It's fine.
just to make it easier.
Yep.
okay.
And if for some reason we find ourselves in a place where the results are not given to us on the appropriate timeline, then the select board can make a decision. Well,
It's in
it
the
says
entire
shall.
year.
It's not gonna come early.
Yeah.
So the worst that could happen is they could not
Right.
meet for a while.
Right. So that, yeah, to Steve's point, they have a year to make the appointment, so.
Could I also ask why the town clerk has a very diminished?
Yep, you can, let me get back to you on that.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Oh,
go,
a non-voting?
yeah, hold on, I'm gonna pause on this, we're gonna go Mike, Tim, Joe, Alan, and then I'll come back to you, Larry.
so where do we leave it? It's a 0 or it's a 1?
A 1,
A 1,
yep,
okay. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I think it's a great idea. I'm actually kind of surprised that in 400 years, we've never had such a requirement to form a committee, because it seemed the last iteration, what little I knew about, I didn't participate. But it seemed like it went in one direction and then had to come back and then went in a different direction. And so I absolutely support the concept of having this committee. And I do agree that it should be the selectmen. I don't think we need 10 people. This seems like a lot, What'd you have the last time? 5?
No, we had,
15, they were
it
everywhere.
wasn't 15, no.
No, there
It
was
was, it was 12
Okay.
plus yourself and Pearl. Both representing the.
Okay, so it was a fairly large group.
And the reasoning, the logic, well, again, they wanted a smaller number, more people showed up, and they just said, let's put everybody on. But it worked, it wasn't, I didn't think it was unwieldy, I think everybody, there were sections of town that I did not have a really good understanding of, and when people talked about it, I just sat back and said,
Okay.
great.
I won't argue with the number then, leave it
Well,
at 10, but.
can I jump in a second, Mike, because one of the things that I'm worried about is that it's an evenly split body, and I guess I'm gonna come back to your point now, Larry. If we're gonna have 10 appointed members, we should probably have the clerk as a voting member, so that there isn't a resulting tie.
Yeah,
From
so
members.
does that seem like a good idea?
I would go beyond that to make the clerk ex officio the chair.
Mhm.
I mean, let's face this.
And voting,
Yeah, might as well be
and
voting.
that would be 11.
There is also the desperate need for major computational ability. It's not regular computers. There's a program that's sent by the feds that in the instance of every time we've ever done it, the only group that had access to that information was the town. Whether or not someone could have, I don't know. I suspect not, because the feds, it's information the feds weren't going to share. So that when Steve was talking about moving things around, you basically couldn't re-precinct Plymouth without that ability. That's not in here.
So like yours, it says, I have the floor.
I'm gonna come back to you in just a second. I'm gonna give you the floor back. But Martha, would you be open to amending your proposal to say precinct advisory committee of 11 members, 5 by the select board, 5 by the COPC, and then saying the town clerk shall serve as the chair?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, sorry, Mike. Didn't mean to take over your floor.
Well, the only other
Back-
comment, the only other comment I was gonna make was, unless I think of something else, was to take out the COPC and leave it with the select board to make all the appointments.
I will defer to the committee on that.
Can I just ask, you mean that they would appoint all 10 people?
Yes.
Okay.
Do folks have strong feelings about whether the COPC should be
I do.
appointing? Thank you, Joe.
I do.
I think
Yeah.
I think we ought to leave it in as well. I think, you know, we've elevated some of the responsibility to the COPC. They're also the leaders of town meeting. They're first among equals, I think, in their precincts, so they should have some say in how their precincts are divided.
That's right. The geographical representation was important, as Steve pointed out, because there were new neighborhoods that came up, and also there was growth in particular areas. So Pine Hills, for example, had gone over the 4,000 vote limit, or the 4,000 voter limit, and that's likely to happen again. And that same kind of geographical representation would be invaluable.
Thanks, Joe. Mike, follow up?
I'm done.
Tim? All set? Joe, do you have follow up?
No. Oh, well, wait a
Alan?
minute. Yeah, I do. So I also wanted to bolster Larry's comment about the technical problems that we had, and say that in fact the computational logistics that the IT department supplied were, I mean, we couldn't have done it without that. And also, I believe that there needs to be even more technical support because in the last exercise, we were relying on paper maps to get on the same page. There were some projections done, and Steve and others were at the front of the room doing work on the actual map that the IT guy was helping with. But the rest of us were at the other end of the table working on paper maps. And so what you want in this situation is to have all the eyes of each of the committee members on the same page at the same time. So there are those kinds of technical requirements that also need to be in this.
I don't know that needs to be in the actual proposal.
That's operational.
I think the committee can ask for that assistance at the time of their impanelment. Follow up, Joe? Anything further?
No, that's all I was going to say.
Thanks, Joe. Alan?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Having served on that working group with, like Steve said, many of the people that are here tonight, learned some things, and there's been some good things brought up here, and I'm not against putting together a committee shortly before it's needed, but the numbers were vitally important, the maps were vitally important, but none of that meant anything until the state made their demarcation lines based on the fact that Plymouth has a split state representative district. We were not able to do anything until the state came to us with their lines, and then we had, to Steve's point a short time ago, we had to sort of throw away our first draft, start over square one. We were able to do it. It's basically just a math problem. But it took some time and hard work by everyone that was on the working group. Larry's 100% right, and I hate to see the wasted energy. It's a waste of time to do it 5 years in advance. The select board could put together a committee and we could track how different precincts are growing if somebody was so inclined to do that. But to sit down and try to work out this problem early is literally, like Larry suggests, a waste of time. So I have no objection to putting a committee together, but I'm very limited as to what was originally read. Thank you.
Len and then Larry. No, sorry, Larry then Len. Larry, good, Len.
I just have a couple of questions. So in the minutes, I mean, in the agenda, you called this the redistricting committee, and here we're calling it the advisory committee.
Yeah, that's originally what we were calling it, but it's in principle, it's the same thing.
So we're gonna,
Redistricting, I'm sorry to jump.
No, that's okay.
Redistricting makes a lot more sense than advisory.
well, it's just for clarification. I mean, it's essentially putting together what we think the way the town should be split up for precincts, present it to the select board, present it to the state, get it approved, and then that's it. I'm just curious about one thing. When the work group committee was formed last time, was there an issue with getting people out of enough different precincts?
No.
No,
No.
okay,
There were, again, a large number of us, and there were no
Right.
two from the same precinct.
you know, it's interesting, we mentioned the term gerrymandering, and I'm not sure there's ever really any gerrymandering in Plymouth for a bunch of reasons. But I think this is good that this is in the charter, that it defines that this needs to happen, because this is an important thing. And I think having COPC members on is just giving you a wide range of people with different views and different expertise. Like Steve said, if somebody comes there with a pet agenda, they'll get flushed out real quickly. They will, the herd will trample them very quickly, you know. They won't survive. So I'm in favor of this, and the logistics of it, you know, I think it makes sense to move it to when the data becomes available, as opposed to trying to spend a lot of time spinning your wheels guessing about what it's going to be, as opposed to what it actually ends up being.
In that vein, Martha, would you be amenable to eliminating section B?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that, and also make a change corresponding to that in C.
What would your change be in C? Sorry.
The advisory committee
Prior to
shall
the release.
review in other words, eliminate from study through, well, eliminate study the town's precincts and population prior to the release of the
Yep.
final decennial federal census. In other words, to go, and take shall out to the precinct, and that to me is a descriptive word. We have precincts. So the precinct advisory committee shall review the final results of the decennial federal census upon receipt, et cetera.
Yep. All right, so I have one other suggestion if you're amenable to this, Martha. So I would amend the second sentence in section 8 to say, the 11th member shall be the town clerk, who shall serve as the chair. Is that okay?
Yep.
And then I would further say, I would cross off, the select board and the COPC shall not appoint two members, that sort of thing. I would cross that off and say, no two members shall be from the same precinct, except in the event that the town clerk is a resident of the town. Another resident from their precinct may be appointed.
Good point.
That's fine.
Okay, all right, so. Do you think I don't know.
Necessary.
Gotcha.
In section C, you have the word, you said that the propose any changes in precincts that the committee deems necessary. it's an advisory committee, it should be making the recommendations appropriate. That they consider appropriate, that any proposed changes that they deem appropriate. Because again, there's no necessity in any way, shape, or form, that's going to be up to the select board that makes the final determination. We're just going to say, we think these are the appropriate things to follow. The select board could turn around and say, thank you very much, and now we're going to do it our way.
Are you good with that, Martha?
Yeah.
All right, so this new proposal would say, I'm gonna read the total amended language. In every year ending in 1, there shall be appointed a precinct advisory committee of 11 members, 5 of whom shall be appointed by the select board, and 5 of whom shall be appointed by the CRPC. The 11th member shall be the town clerk, who shall serve as the chair. No 2 members shall be from the same precinct, except in the event that the town clerk is a resident of the town, another resident from their precinct may be appointed. Clause B has been eliminated, so clause C would go on to say, I guess the new clause B would say, the precinct advisory committee shall review the final results of the decennial federal census upon receipt, and shall propose any changes in precincts that the committee deems appropriate to the select board. The precinct advisory committee shall hold 1 or more public hearings to solicit public input. Is there a motion to adopt the proposal as amended for the precinct advisory committee?
So moved.
Ms. Botrain makes the motion. Is there a second? I'll second. Mr. Bulletin seconds. Is there further discussion on the matter? Hearing and seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Bulletin.
Yes.
Your vote. Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yeah.
Mr. Levin.
Yes.
Mr. Pizer.
No.
Ms. Votrain.
Yes.
Mr. Duperolo. Oh, I think you were muted, Rob.
Yeah, I was. My vote's no.
Thank you. And I vote yes. The motion carries with 7 in favor and 2 against, as well as our alternate being in. Okay, Michelle, I can give you my handwritten notes here, and if you need help interpreting them. Are we okay inserting this into section 8? We didn't make that as part of the motion. Do we want to take a motion to include it in section 8?
Option A.
Seems like there's agreement.
That makes sense.
Why don't we just, let's cross our Ts and dot our Is. Is there a motion to insert the newly adopted precinct advisory committee into chapter 8?
Certainly, yes.
The motion has been made by Mr. Lawler. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Levin makes the second. Is there further discussion on the matter? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bulletin.
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon.
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco is not present. Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Mr.
Excuse
Hutchinson.
me, yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson. Mr.
Yes.
Lawler. Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Pizer.
No.
Mr. Levin, I skipped you.
Yes.
Ms. Botrain.
Yes.
Mr. Zuparoli.
No.
And I vote yes as well. The motion carries with 7 in favor plus the alternate and 2 against. All right. I'll give you folks at this point a preview of our next meeting. Michelle and I have started compiling a list of topics. There was a request to start pursuing the renumbering process. I think that makes sense. There's also a request to address the inclusion of the communications department. I'll put it on the agenda, though I think the general philosophy we've had is to not describe departments within the charter. But I will let the committee make that decision. There's also a request for the election of the community preservation committee. I will reach out to the chairman of that committee and let him know that there is such a request. I'll further note that this would only be the 4 members that are currently appointed by the select board, the members at large. The remaining members are all statutorily, included on the committee.
Are we allowed to change? I thought we were not allowed to change appointed to elected and
We
elected
are.
to appointed.
It's only for town meeting, select board, and the town manager that we can't change their selection process. Every other board and committee is up for grabs. That is something that I've extensively and exhaustively covered with both town council as well as the attorney general's office.
Good to know.
I've also included on there, the timeline through town meeting. I think we should review it and reconfigure it, considering we are a little bit behind where we thought we'd be. And then lastly, with the election coming this weekend, I've also inserted a possible reorganization of this committee. So if there are additional topics that you folks want to address, please email them to me no later than Thursday. Michelle and I will post the agenda. We need to post the agenda by Friday. So please, if you haven't given me those by Thursday, know that I will not be able to include them. Is there any new business? Mr. Pizer?
I would propose that we spread upon the record our appreciation of the work of our chair. I believe that his diligence and his ability to research and his general demeanor have served us very well. And I would ask the vote be taken on that.
I don't think a vote is necessary,
Okay.
but I very
Here,
much
here.
appreciate the sentiment.
So that means you come to Labatt and buy in the first round?
So what's the process? I mean, so Saturday happens.
Yeah, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse. That's why I put possible reorganization as the agenda item. If there is a situation in which I, as chair, am no longer the chair of this committee, there will be a reorganization. I've asked, I'm gonna speak with Michelle about having her open the nomination for chair. If there is a selection of a new chair, at that point, the chair will take over and solicit nominations as appropriate for other open positions on the committee.
Is there a scheduled meeting right now?
Next Tuesday.
So no matter what, will you be here next Tuesday?
No, that's why I said possible reorganization. If I'm here, I'm not gonna reorganize. Unless the committee so chooses. Yeah, and I will say, in response to what you said, Mr. President, I very much appreciate that sentiment. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you folks throughout this process. And no matter what happens in this weekend's election, I will still be here to help shepherd this through to the end. Is there any additional new business?
I think you've done a great job.
Is there any old business? Hearing and seeing none, unless there's objection, I call this meeting adjourned.
So be it.
Thank you.